Hello, this is Adam Bernard with AutoPerspectives, and it is once again time for our weekly news roundup, coming a little later than usual due to a long weekend vacation and a supersized episode courtesy of IAA. There was quite a bit revealed at the Munich Motor Show last week on top of some of the previews we saw the week before, so we have an extra special set of goodies to talk about today. We will start with a significant entry from Volkswagen Group. That is the ID.Cross. Now, this is not just a jacked up ID Polo, which we talked about a little last week, but it does give the brand an affordable EV SUV to take on existing competitors from, among others, Stellantis, Mini, Ford, Nissan, Kia, and Renault. It is twinned with the Skoda Epic, which was also revealed in Munich. This is one of 5 new entries off the new affordable architecture derived from VW Group's MB.EA architecture, in this case, which moves to a front drive configuration instead of rear drive. It does offer a small front, however, despite being a front drive vehicle. Size-wise, it's very similar to the internal combustion T-Cross. And of course, the name ID.Cross is a move from Volkswagen away from alphanumerics. This might have been called the ID.2X, but VW now is going to be twinning their EV names with their internal combustion counterparts. The size, again, is similar to the internal combustion T-Cross, but it is a very useful 3 inches wider, and so the 450 liters worth of cargo space is nearly the same as that of the internal combustion sibling. The new graphics that you see front and rear and the surfacing is expected to influence, among others, the update of the ID.4, which is due next year, which might wind up being renamed the ID Tiguan, and that includes the ID Buzz-inspired C-pillar graphics, which actually go back to the original microbus, and sort of the 3D lighting effects that you see front and rear. The concept was shown with a front-mounted 208 horsepower motor, an unspecified battery size, and a range of about 420 kilometers on the WLTP cycle, about 225 miles on the EPA cycle, which is not too bad. Maybe not big enough for the US market, but not bad for Europe, and a reasonable 2,600 pound towing capacity. Now, VW has already confirmed that their production version of the ID EV3, which is the entry level model off this portfolio, is due in 27, and that will get the new Rivian software stack, which means the ID.Cross, which is due in 2026, will not get that initially, but they could add it as a mid-cycle update. Once you get to the interior, pleasant surprise here. Volkswagen has promised they would go back to physical controls, and they seem to have delivered that here in a conventionally laid out, but still very attractive interior. And for a change, it's not black on black on black. There's a bank of physical buttons below the center touchscreen, and what appear to be physical, not capacitive switches on the steering wheel as well. It's got a kind of cool looking floating center console, which we think will make production. And VW, to their credit, has scrapped the practice that we see in some of the newer Volkswagen vehicles where they have 2 instead of 4 window switches. And to open the rear windows, you have to switch a toggle from front to rear and vice versa. And now there is a window switch for each of the 4 windows of the vehicle, which sounds logical, but apparently doesn't always happen. One item, oddly enough, not mentioned is any sort of head-up display. Overall, this seems to be a pretty competitive entry in terms of features, tech, design. We don't know the pricing yet for sure, but it will likely be competitively priced as well when it hits the market next year. And so it looks like VW's got a nice portfolio of new entry-level EVs to launch in the near future. We move up a notch to a mid-size entry. This is the Cupra Vindaya concept. To refresh your memory, Cupra was originally the performance sub-brand to VW Group's Sept brand, and then it was spun off as a separate brand in 2018. So think of it as kind of like a Spanish Alfa Romeo. The original plans had been to bring Cupra to the US market in 2030 in partnership with Penske Automotive. That launch has been delayed amidst a variety of economic uncertainties, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with. The Vindaya concept appears to represent the potential new midsize SUV that Cupra had talked about bringing to the US market, because of course we don't like stuff that's really small here. This is Cupra's largest entry yet, roughly the size of Ford Edge, to give you a reference point. It's named after a volcano, in case you're wondering where Vindaya came from. And Cupra has pretty much confirmed that this is going into production, obviously going to be a little toned down. The aggressive exterior design is actually a little in contrast to a lot of the more simple and minimalist approaches that we've seen from other brands. The body color actually shifts from gray to beige front to rear. It's a little hard to tell in this particular photo. Cupra calls the stance of the Vindaya pushing forward. It features 23-inch wheels, multiple sharp edges, and intersecting surfaces. And if you're seeing a bit of the Lamborghini Urus here, you are not alone. There are a lot of triangular design elements, especially among the lighting elements, front and rear, that tie to the brand's triangular logo. It uses a B-Comp flax fiber as a sustainable alternative to carbon fiber. And in this view, you can see the Y-shaped spine on the roof, which uses 3D printed structural parts and houses 2 removable roof panels for a little open air excitement. This particular vehicle is configured as a 1.5 liter e-rev on the new SSP, or the Scalable Systems platform. We know that there's a variety of capabilities of SSP. This is the first e-rev that we've seen from Volkswagen Group in Europe. It's said to have a range of about 186 miles on the European cycle, roughly 160 miles on the EPA cycle, with a dual motor, 489 horsepower configuration, claiming 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 4.1 seconds. The interior is equally avant-garde, features a steering yoke instead of a steering wheel, which kind of looks cool, maybe a little less practical in practice, and a curved 24-inch display. But Cupra specifically points out that there is not a touchscreen here because they want to avoid distractions while driving. So it's all touch controls on the steering wheel and gesture controls as well. And the center console features what they call the jewel, and that's that kind of illuminated triangle that you see there. It's described as a sensory and symbolic interface that awakens the vehicle, adjusts driving modes, and transforms the atmosphere. The trim includes 3D printed aluminum and waxed bronze microfiber, and the seats are inspired by Eames chairs. And the interior also features copper accent lighting. And copper is a color that's kind of a Cupra signature. Cupra has been sort of a surprise bit of success for Volkswagen Group. It does kind of leave the future of the Seat brand open. But Cupra moving up market into the midsize segment gives them a vehicle that's probably going to be a little higher margin and a little more profitable overall. But we probably have several years until anything close to this from a production standpoint hits the market. One more SUV to look at is the Mercedes-Benz GLC EQ, and we'll call it that as the shorthand here. And this is the launch of the MB.EA architecture. This vehicle replaces the rather unloved Mercedes EQC, which was sufficiently uncompetitive to make it actually to the US market at all. That vehicle was derived from an internal combustion platform, but MB.EA is now a dedicated EV architecture, and this is now a state-of-the-art EV platform. It's a clean sheet setup. It puts the GLC EQ, officially known as the GLC with EQ technology, on a longer wheelbase than the internal combustion GLC, and so that offers more legroom, headroom, and Mercedes' first frunk in an EV. All the Mercedes EVs that we've seen up to this point have had the hood sealed, as it were. And that frunk here is actually twice as big as the BMW iX3 that we discussed last week. Up front is the new face of Mercedes, and I confess I'm a little mixed on this. We've seen the BMW is kind of backing away from the giant grills. Mercedes is going full forward with this. It's described as an illuminated high-tech masterpiece inspired by the Mercedes grills of the 1960s. So if you go and look at some of those big Mercedes sedans from back then, you'll see a family resemblance. But the rest of the vehicle is actually maybe a little more conservative. It does look a lot like the internal combustion GLC. And this is probably a response to the negative feedback on the current EQE and EQS families of vehicles, which have not exactly been flying off of showroom floors. The rear view of the GLC EQ highlights the multiple appearances of the three-pointed star inside and out. You can see little elements there in the tail lamps. The GLC EQ will launch initially as all-wheel drive only, with about 483 horsepower, with rear drive variants and an AMG version to essentially follow. The 94 kilowatt hour battery is a bit smaller than BMW's, and so is the range at about 713 kilometers on the European cycle, which works out to about 380 miles on the EPA cycle, a little below the BMW estimate of 400. It does include V2L, V2G, and V2H capability, but the 330 kilowatt DC fast charge rate, about 160 miles in 10 minutes, is also a bit behind BMW's numbers. For Mercedes' credit, unlike the smaller CLA EQ, GLC EQ can charge at 400 volt charge stations, which is good because there are still a lot of those left in the world, especially in the North American market. Underneath MB.EA is the new MB.OS, or the Mercedes operating system. This includes AI tools from both Microsoft and Google. So they're basically leveraging everything out there, and that provides access to over 40 apps and video streaming. MB Drive is their automated driving technology. It uses up to 10 cameras, 5 radar units, and 12 ultrasonic sensors. Although they haven't specified what kind of hands-free capability is available. And here in this view, you get a good look of the optional hyperscreen, which is an evolution of what launched on the EQS. Now, you recall on the EQS, it was 3 displays under a single pane of glass. So when it was off, it looked really cool. When it was on, you could see the 3 individual displays. Now you see a single 39-inch wide screen spanning the entire width of the dashboard. So it frankly looks pretty cool. Mercedes also gets an industry first point with its independently certified vegan interior. A number of automakers are offering interiors with sustainable materials or vegan leather, but this is vegan across the board apparently. And the optional panoramic glass roof is embedded with 162 stars, kind of a poor man's version of Rolls-Royce's Starlight headliner. Overall, Mercedes has stumbled a bit with the initial range of their dedicated EVs, and this is an opportunity to right the ship, as it were. And it looks like they have done that with MB.EA. It is definitely a much more competitive vehicle. We haven't looked at all the specs side by side with the iX3. There's some areas where BMW is better, some areas where Mercedes is better, offering things like rear wheel steering, for example. And so obviously once both vehicles are in the market, I'm sure the media will definitely be looking forward to putting these two vehicles side by side. And now we're going to switch over to cars. And yes, even though some automakers have kind of abandoned the car segments across the board, there are some automakers still building cars, and some of them were in concept or production form at Munich. And we'll start with the Hyundai Concept 3. This previews the first entry for the brand off the company's new lower-cost EV platform. That platform is already underpinning the Kia EV3, EV4, and EV5. We haven't seen a Hyundai version yet, and so this is it. Now, the Kia EV3 is a small SUV, but we expect the production version of this concept to be called the Ioniq 3, and that is more of a compact hatchback, which means it'll target vehicles like the Volkswagen ID.3, the Peugeot E308, and the Renault Megane E-Tech. The exterior is driven by Hyundai's Art of Steel philosophy, with a coupe-like hatchback profile with just a little Hyundai Veloster in there, some intersecting surfaces, and an anodized effect finish with yellow tinted glass and accents. The profile should give the Ioniq 3 an advantage over the EV3 in both performance and range. So we'll have to wait until next year when the Ioniq 3 launches to see what the numbers actually look like. Like Hyundai's other EVs, parametric pixel lighting is used front and rear, which kind of ties the design to other Hyundai EVs. And they have a new avatar called Mr. Pix, which is a little character made of pixels that you'll see pop up in various areas throughout the vehicle. A little Easter egg there. The rear spoiler is made of a yellow transparent plastic, which will probably not make it to production. It's worth noting here that Hyundai has said that previously it wants to avoid the Russian doll approach to design that other brands take, where every SUV looks like a smaller or larger version of its siblings. The Hyundai EVs all look pretty different. If you look at an Ioniq 5 and an Ioniq 6 and an Ioniq 9, they have some common design elements, but they don't all look so similar. And that was the goal here with Concept 3, and they appear to have succeeded. Once you get inside the Ioniq 3, it offers what they call a furnished space. That it's not really beige or plain gray. It's kind of a purple tinted gray with some cool accent lighting and creamy yellow accents as well. The materials here include ocean waste textiles and lightweight aluminum foam. You'll note that there is not a touchscreen. There's not even really an instrument cluster in front of the driver per se, but you see the cubes on either side of the steering wheel. Those are kind of pixel-inspired displays, each with a separate information element contained within. Not sure if that's going to make production. It seems a little maybe too avant-garde, but again, we're about a year away from launch, and Hyundai has been pushing the envelope in design in a number of other areas. Overall, it looks like the Ioniq 3 already has some pretty good bones with the EV3 based on the reviews that are out there. So it seems like the production Ioniq 3 should be quite competitive with other compact hatchback EVs. Volkswagen Group's Skoda showed the Vision O, and O is for Octavia. That's kind of a core model for the Skoda brand. This is a hint of what to expect from the upcoming fully electric Octavia Estate, which is due around 2028. Originally, Skoda had hinted this vehicle would show up around 2026, but looks like we're going to have to wait a little until we see it. This is expected to use SSP, although it wasn't confirmed here at the show. And it showcases the next generation of Skoda's modern solid design language. SSP is expected to be 800 volt capable with power levels anywhere from 85 to 850 kilowatts, replacing both MEB and PPE within the Volkswagen group, but it'll be rolled out over a kind of long period of time. Up front is the new Tech Loop face. If you've seen some of the more recent Skodas, this is kind of an evolution of the front of the vehicle. The rear end showcases a T-shaped LED tail lamp motif. There's active cooling and hood ventilation to optimize the aerodynamic performance, although they don't quote a specific drag coefficient here. And you note the trapezoidal B pillar and the black C and D pillars give the vehicle a rather unique DLO and in top of a traditional wagon profile. Like many automakers, Skoda has developed their own personal digital assistant. This one is named Laura, named most likely for co-founder Václav Lauren. Laura can take meeting notes or plan dinner, as well as tell stories to the kids. There's also an AI-powered loading assistant, which helps the driver remotely prepare the vehicle's storage space for transporting large or bulky items. Inside, it sounds like BMW's new panoramic iDrive has caught on. The folks at Skoda have shown what they call the Horizon display, which is basically a full-width display at the base of the windshield, not unlike the BMW iX3, and that is coupled with a center-mounted portrait touchscreen, not the kind of cool-looking parallelogram of the iX3, unfortunately. Like the ID.Cross, the interior is neutrally colored with a variety of sustainable materials, including recycled leather flooring and flat knit upholstery, and kind of a cool 3D look to the headrest that you can see here in this photo. Skoda talks about their Clever features. Clever is kind of part of their brand promise. So there's a removable Bluetooth speaker, an integrated fridge, and dedicated storage for the charge cables in the trunk. The Vision O also features bio-adaptive lighting, which adjusts the cabin shades according to natural light cycles, and that ties into the industry's increasing focus on wellness in the auto industry. It is nice to see folks still doing cars, especially wagons. Wagons are totally out of style here in the North American market, but Europe still likes them. That's why the Chinese are starting to get into wagons as well. So this should prove to be an interesting entry for Skoda when it does eventually hit the market in about 3 years or so. Polestar showed their new flagship finally, the 5. This is the brand's first bespoke and bonded aluminum architecture. And the 5 is designed to take on the Porsche Taycan, the Tesla Model S, and the upcoming Mercedes AMG GT 4-door, which we'll likely see a little later this year. If it looks familiar, it should. It was previewed as the Precept concept a whopping 5 years ago. So we've been waiting a little while to see the production version of the Precept. Up front is a compact double wishbone suspension that keeps the front end nice and low. Polestar claims a pretty respectable drag coefficient of 0.24. To be honest, other big sedans are getting closer to 0.21 or 0.22, so maybe this is a little less aerodynamic. But on the other hand, it doesn't look like an anonymous bar of soap, so credit to them for that. The fastback design is similar to the original Precept. The footprint is just a bit larger than the Taycan. Unfortunately, it is about 250 kilograms heavier. And that's especially unfortunate given the aluminum intensive architecture, which you think would help manage the mass. Up front is the Smart Zone, which houses a variety of drive assist sensors, and it is flanked by dual blade headlamps, which is Polestar's upfront lighting signature. I'm told if you look very closely, and I was not in Munich live to see this, you can see a state of charge indicator on the C pillar. But what you'll also notice in this particular view is that, like the Concept and the Polestar 4, which is already in market, there is no rear window. So you rely solely on the digital rearview mirror to see out of the back of the vehicle. And of course, that does free up some additional rear seat space. This is an 800 volt architecture, so they're claiming a maximum charge rate of 350 kilowatts or 10 to 80% in about 22 minutes, which is competitive with the Taycan. The 550 kilowatt dual motor hits 100 kilometers an hour in 3.9 seconds. The performance model with 650 kilowatts does the same run in 3.2 seconds. So not quite as fast as a high-end Taycan, but still reasonably competitive. The EV ranges turn out to be about 275 to 330 miles on the EPA range. Again, like the performance, competitive, but not necessarily class-leading. Inside is a suitably minimalist Scandinavian-inspired interior. The standard Microtech upholstery is described as animal welfare secured, chrome-free, and a natural byproduct of the food industry. But yes, if you are so inclined, there is actual real leather available. So you can see the nice big 14.5-inch portrait touchscreen. There's a tiny little 9-inch IP cluster, a head-up display, 4-zone climate control, and heat, ventilation, and massage for each of the 4 primary seats, because this is a 4+1 seater. They use flax-derived Amplitex as an alternative to carbon fiber because it is more sustainable, with other recycled and recyclable materials used throughout. Polestar claims there are 11 cameras, 1 driver camera, 1 mid-range radar, and 12 ultrasonic sensors to support the various driver assist technology, although they don't specifically call out the hands-free capability, and maybe we'll hear about that when we get closer to the on-sale date. Notably absent from the discussion, there's no rear-wheel steering, no torque vectoring, or limited slip differential, at least nothing that they've talked about so far. Polestar has had some issues. Part of it is building vehicles in China, which means they're subject to tariffs in both Europe and North America. Part of it is the flattening of demand for EVs, and part of it is being a new brand as well. This vehicle, I think it's really sexy to look at, and the technology seems competitive, but it might not be enough to stand out. And frankly, there seems to be a huge demand for flagship sedans these days. So this may bring a bit of a halo effect to the brand, but they really need a newer high volume entry. So we may have to wait a couple of years for the Polestar 7 as a new entry-level SUV. And finally, we'll finish off with the Chinese. There were lots of Chinese automakers at the show. There were a couple of worldwide debuts, although none of them were really groundbreaking. I chose to focus on Avatr, who are going after, of all things, Rolls-Royce and Bentley with the Xpectra. Avatr is a premium NEV brand that's owned by Chang'an and battery maker CATL. That was launched back in 2018. They already have a portfolio of cars and SUVs that are both EVs or E-Revs. The Xpectra is a whopping 5.8 meters long. That's just a little longer than a standard wheelbase Rolls-Royce Phantom. So this is not a shrinking violet, and it features rear coach doors with no B-pillars. Avatr describes this as the world's first emotive intelligent vision car. The design is said to be inspired by the power of natural energy. The exterior features sharp geometric surfaces reminiscent of cut gemstones. And as you can see, the entire upper is made of glass. There are some slim pillars and structure, but it almost reminds you a little of some of those cool concept cars that we saw with the total glass uppers in the 50s and 60s. There are motion sensors to detect the approaching driver to trigger a suitably dramatic animated lighting sequence. We really don't know what powers the Xpectra. Could be EV or E-Rev based on what Avatr already has on the shelf. Inside the vehicle, just forward of the dashboard, as it were, is the Vortex. The Vortex is the name for the AI device intended to, quote, form a deep emotional connection with the driver through advanced ambient lighting technology. And there's a panoramic display below that. Avatr talks about the alabaster shimmer concept, which includes lavender glass elements to reflect light in specific ways. There are also transparent illuminated headrests, which you can see in the upper right photo there, with the seats featuring nubuck leather and 3D knitted fabrics with inflatable components. Avatr has been in market now for about 3 years, slowly expanding their portfolio. They are not what I call a high volume player, but they are looking to kind of build a reputation as an alternative to some of the existing kind of tier 2 and tier 3 European and Japanese luxury brands. No plans that we know of to build the Xpectra, but they obviously have a vision in mind of going even further on market than they already are. And that about wraps things up for this supersized edition of AutoPerspectives. If you like what you see, please subscribe and share. To check out the blog, visit AutoPerspectives.net, and we will see you back here in a little less than a week with another news update. Thanks for watching and listening. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.